Welcome, one and all, throughout time and space for this episode of Weebs on the Weekends, the podcast where we break down the anime news highlights of the week and give a retrospective look on an anime that premiered 10 years ago. Today's episode will cover the 2021 Crunchyroll Awards nominees in lieu of the news for the third week of January 2022, as well as continue our series highlighting the voice actor of the 7th Seiyu Awards, Yuki Kaiji. In this highlight, we will be covering his career throughout the year 2012, showcasing the talent that helped him win this prestigious award. This 2012 work that we are covering today is the anime The Daily Life of High School Boys. We would also like to give our thoughts on whether to resurrect or rebury this franchise. My name is Sam Martinez. I'm a part-time weeb, full-time automail mechanic, and with me as always is my co-host, Jay Johnson, part-time weeb, full-time English language sensei. Now, Jay, before we get on to the Crunchyroll Awards, which you have called aptly, very much so, basically the anime equivalent for the Oscars, is there anything that you would like to talk about that you did this week?
Just other than I'm back on break. I think I talked about that last episode, but this week specifically, we had our basically annual review, which you go in front of the faculty, staff, the school director, and just basically say what you did during the year, how's the reporting going, how the students are performing under, the new guidelines of like COVID restrictions and a lot of other things that have been implemented recently. But yeah, overall, doing pretty well. It was a really like harrowing kind of situation because you do have to account for like how much like not sloth I guess it was kind of built up in students' minds. Like even now I'm helping students write their college applications, and colleges have kind of taken a step away from the idea that COVID is a big deal anymore. So they're kind of like, if your family's business has tanked or you're like dealing with a lot of financial issues, universities are a little bit more in the mindset of, okay, you should have gotten over it by now.
That's kind of harsh way of thinking, though.
Yeah, it's really harsh,
Yeah.
but it's one of those things of universities trying to push forward through a global crisis, and that's kind of the way to keep up standards. Like they kind of lose legitimacy or their prestige if they kind of let things slip in that kind of regard. I mean, even through wars or global tragedies, like universities still have to function because their business is in the future. So that's where they're always looking. So it's kind of one of those harsh lessons I'm trying to pass on to my students properly, but that kind of hits teachers really hard when you have to say, oh, maybe you're going to have to wait a year, or maybe you have to go to your third option university or college to settle and wait a little bit longer for your future to happen. Because like when you're a student in like at least foreign countries, you're kind of thinking, oh, I'm gearing my education to go abroad. And when countries are closing their borders or restricting foreigners to come in, or even closing down certain programs that aid students to go abroad, students are just like disheartened. So it's kind of a sad thing, but I'm kind of making my way through it. But overall, I have another 2 weeks of winter break to kind of relax and play some more Minecraft. So I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself, Sam? How was Wadapalooza?
Yes, exactly. So essentially what Wadapalooza is, it's basically a convention for CrossFitters, because WOD is just an acronym for Workout of the Day. And Wadapalooza is essentially just a competition where CrossFitters would go to so that they can compete in the in the World Cup, quote unquote, Olympics versions of what CrossFit is. It's called like the CrossFit Games. And so usually if you can compete at a high level in Wadapalooza, then you can be nominated, or you can be selected to go compete in the CrossFit Games. And essentially it was very, very cool. It was like going to a convention, instead of where you would see people wear all kinds of anime cosplays, like seeing an old man in a Sailor Moon uniform. You would see a whole lot of fit people wearing little clothing, and that's not necessarily too bad on the eyes. But it was actually kind of cool because I was able to see an adaptive sports segment where essentially people who had disabilities such as amputations were able to compete, and you would see these competitors do handstand push-ups as well as snatches. And there was this one individual, she was blind, and it was really cool seeing her perform her stuff because she had somebody that was essentially showing her where the wall was, where she can do her handstand against, and do her push-ups and basically take her to where the weights were. And she was having some difficulty on doing the snatches, but essentially the crowd was able to cheer her on, and she was able to complete her workout. So it was very, very cool. Like I said, it was very fun going to a con that was different than I was normally used to, which I said earlier was the anime convention. So I would definitely suggest that to other people. That way you can have like an experience, like a different kind of experience, but it's similar as well, you know?
Right, yeah, because it's the same feel or vibe that you get from watching the Special Olympics compared to the non-Special Olympics. I don't know how you would refer to that.
Well, no,
But
they were sort of competing at the same time. Like if you were to compare it to the Olympics and the Special Olympics, whereas they don't have them competing at the same time. You have the Olympics first, and then maybe a week or two afterwards, you have the Paralympics. But here at this competition, you had them side by side, and you got a chance to see the layout as well. Like you would have one stadium where one group of competitors are there, they're doing their thing, and then literally the stadium like right beside them, they you would have the people in the adaptive sports doing their competitions as well. The competitions, like I was seeing, like the amputated individuals, like a lot of them that were above the knee, they had to take their leg off when they had to do the handstanding push-ups. And I found myself kind of chuckling because like I'm like, of course they would do that. Like they would need to be able to, because if you had like that whole leg with the knee and the foot, it's not very stable for you to do handstand push-ups in that manner. And it's just very interesting to see like one of the obstacles that they would have to go through in order to compete, like how much time that would take, for them to take the leg on, to put it back off, so they can do their workout. Because with a WOD, a workout of the day, you have to do so many sets, so many reps under a certain amount of time. So it's all time based, and it's all just you trying to be as efficient as you can. And like I said, like it's definitely even just like sitting in the stands, like I felt like I was getting tired watching these people exercise. But like any other convention, they had snacky snacks that were out in the crowd and in the vendors where you were able to go and refuel. So it was pretty cool. I learned that there's something called like a bison bar, which is like beef jerky made out of bison. So I'm going to be eating more on that a little bit. Do you have any bison where you're at, or I think it's like just venison where like the most exotic meat that you can get?
venison, well, there's yak, camel,
Oh,
reindeer. Wolves are endangered here, so I don't think anyone's snacking on wolves. The Arctic wolves here. But yeah, so usually camel jerky is like pretty a favorite item for tourists, especially. But yeah,
have
reindeer,
you had any? Or like what's your favorite? Is it you said yak, reindeer, or camel? So which of those is your favorite?
camel definitely.
Next time I'm in the Mongolia region, I'm going to have to try some camel jerky then. With that, or with our mental bellies full, I think it's time for us to go on to the news segment, right? Because we have, I say we, but you told me before the beginning of the podcast that you have quite a lot to say in regards to the Crunchyroll Awards. So I feel as though we should probably get to it, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. So, as you always say, Sam, time codes are going to be in the doobly doo below, in the
Yes.
description below. But yeah, so we have our discussion later on about the daily lives of high school boys. And right now, I have so much to talk about with the Crunchyroll Awards this year because the Crunchyroll Awards, at least for right now, is like one of those emerging kind of award ceremonies because this is only the sixth annual Crunchyroll Awards. And most recently, what they changed from last year is how they basically cut off certain animes or how they identify which animes can be nominated. And what they have done this year has kind of been antithetical to the whole point of awards,
Hmm.
where they have divided between identifying chords, COUR. Core is basically either the first half of their publication, usually being 12 episodes, and the second half of their publication for another 12 episodes. So usually a series, season one is in 24 episodes. So they split it between two seasons with usually a season in the middle of a break. So if an anime has their first core or the first 12 episodes in the winter, their second core will be in the summer. And what Crunchyroll has done, which they have always been in this winter season, has said, oh, we're going to identify the cores so they can get proper recognition, which is, again, nice in theory, but when in execution, we see that last year, Jujutsu Kaisen won Anime of the Year award, and
Hmm.
again, it's nominated for Anime of the Year award, which again feels kind of counterproductive if it can win twice in a row. But the previous case, why they made this rule, is because Jujutsu Kaisen won, but only had 5 or 7 episodes, I believe, out at release at the time.
Their core wasn't even finished at that time.
Yeah, the first course, so even the first 12 episodes. So something that had basically only had 5 episodes was running against series that had already run in full, like Great Pretender
Yeah.
was also nominated. Same thing with Keep Your Hands Off Ezuken was also nominated, which are outstanding animes. But this anime
Hmm.
that only had 5 episodes won Anime of the Year. And even how great Jujutsu Kaisen, and we agreed like that's the best anime was one the is the best anime of the year is like there was no way to really measure it as such. So now it coming back to the award ceremonies, it's nominated again for its second core. So we have 5 categories that we want to talk about. So there
Hmm.
are a bunch more like best voice acting performance, best opening and ending sequence, best couple, best director, best score. But we want to talk about the 5 major ones that really give distinction to the Crunchyroll Awards over other award shows. So Sam, our first award we're going to talk about is the Best Fight Scene Award. So we have, I believe, 5 nominations for this category. So
Oh my goodness. It's I would say I can go ahead and I can go through the nominees. Mainly because like with this one, this was one of my hardest one to pick because all these fights were really good and going through the scene like I and we could talk about this as well like on like what obviously is going to be Crunchyroll's pick, but I would just have to say like these were all very good contenders for this scene. And the first scene that we have up is Eren Yeager versus the Warhammer Titan in Attack on Titan Final Season Part 1. We then have Naruto Uzumaki's fight with Ishiki Otsuki in Boruto The Next Generations. We then have two nominations from Jujutsu Kaisen, the first being with Yuji Itadori and Ao Todo versus Hanami. And then we have Yuji Itadori and Nobara Kugisaki versus Eso and Kijisu. Next, we have Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid S, Elma versus Toru. And then we have nomination from Vivi Fluorite's I Song, where it's Vivi versus Yugo Kakitani. Excuse me. And as I said, like all these fights were very good in terms of thematically, choreography, and with the I would say the music more so for Vivi and Yugo with how that series had used songs to begin with, but I would say all of them were very, very strong contenders. Now, Jay, which do you think is going to be Crunchy's pick, and which is your pick for the
Right,
fight
yeah,
of the
because
week?
we do want to distinguish that, like, we as fans have our own picks, and then how, the Crunchyroll Academy board, or at least how the judges board is assembled, is basically, professional fans of anime. We see Giguk, Mother's Basement, the Anime Man, Connor VA. So there's like personality types that make up the board and the voting body essentially. Well, the public is the voting body, but the judges have a certain percentage for what they deem as the winners and the losers. So for me personally, I think this only goes. So you do make a great distinction, Sam, between like each of these fights. I think like
Mm-hmm.
the Toru versus Emma fight is kind of like a let's give Kyoto Animation a pity prize essentially for coming back because again they're recovering from the arson attack that they suffered from 2 years ago. So
Mm-hmm.
this feels like one of those not pity prizes. I didn't mean to say that, but it feels like this is where they had the best chance of winning. And then the other one I would discount is the Eren Yeager versus Warhammer Titan fight because that's the shortest fight of the
Yeah.
ones here. So it's really intense and it's the first fight of the season. But again, holding a candle against the others, it doesn't really. So I think what will and what should win is the Yuji and Toto fight versus Nanami.
Ooh, that's some grandstanding there. I I do agree with you that like the Yuji and Total fight is very, very good, but for me, I prefer the Yuji and Nobara fight mainly because at that time with Yuji and Toto, we don't really necessarily like know what well, we see Toto try to force a relationship on Itadori, and for some reason it just works and it clicks for that fight. And I would say that that fight, or at least like that relationship, sort of hints at something that seems to be like an underlying factor in Jujutsu Kaisen that we could talk about later. But I prefer the Nobara versus the Nobara and Itadori fight because we had that rapport with Nobara and Itadori and get to see them actually fight back to back and support one another. It was just very, very well done. But I feel as though that the Crunchyroll Awards is going to make Naruto take the win solely for the sake of nostalgia. I mean, like I said, that was a good fight.
Yeah, you sorry, I didn't really factor that in because I'm thinking of it solely as the fight itself, and like they've done some like side by side comparisons of how the coordinator of the fight went back to the End Valley fight of Naruto versus Sasuke from part one of Naruto, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
did the same choreography in his animation. So I'm not really thinking about the consequences of the fight. So that's a fair assessment because the anything from Baruto would not make this fight, but this is like the peak that the old generation in Naruto can perform at. So
Mm-hmm.
that's fair. I'm just thinking like that does seem like a Crunchyroll pick for sure. Huh.
But at least like those are what our thoughts on the best fight scene.
Mhm.
And so the next that we have up is Best Girl. Did you want to take this one, or did you want me to take it?
Oh yeah, I can do the best girl category. So again, the distinction of the Crunchyroll Awards from other awards is that the best girl and best boy categories. And again, this is really
Mm-hmm.
hard to really nailed down a good definition because it's not antagonist or protagonist or best character design, but it is something of a personality choice for the judges. So for this year, the best girl category, first best girl is Toru Honda from Fruit Baskets, the final season. Next is Koto or Shotoko Komi from Komi Can't Communicate. Then is Nobara Kushisaki from Jujutsu Kaisen. Next nominee is, oh, this is interesting. It is Vladlina Mizuki, I think. 86 from 86. Next is Ao Otto from Wonder Egg Priority. And last is Sakusa Watanabe from an anime I haven't heard of. That's very odd. It's from the anime Kakeki Shoujo. That is a wild nomination because I know all the best girls this year. This best girl, I have no idea who that best girl is, but yeah. So from this is another like slam dunk for me for the picks of what will be nominated and what should be nominated, and it obviously for me goes to Comey from Comey Can't Communicate. But how about you, Sam? Where are you feeling?
Are you saying like your slam dunk? Is it the same as the last award where you are in agreement with Crunchyroll in Crunchy, thinking that Komi-san's going to be the one to win the award?
Right. Yeah, I think there's an obvious choice here.
Yeah. So I think that Crunchy's going to pick Komi-san, but for me, it's going to be Nobara. Nobara is always the best girl for me. I would say that from Wonder Egg's probably a close second, but bro, with Nobara, she can handle business and she has that cute girly side that she can turn on and off. Like that's best girl material for me.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's always like for me, because I always exclude best boy and best girl for the qualification of badass. If you're going to say like which identifying marker is taking you out of the best girl category. Same thing with Vladina or Valadelia from 86. Like she's a commander of a suicidal, basically kamikaze kind of unit in a futuristic setting or dystopia. So like badass, Nobara, badass. Toru kind of is like on the boundary because that's a rom-com fruit baskets and it has like the precedents for having like best girls in the series. And like Wonder Egg, I think the mixed reception of that kind of disqualifies it as well. But like Comey is like adorable with like her pop-up cat ears, the communication disorder that she has, her relationship with Tadano in the series. So there's like best girl elements that I think when you have like a girl that wields a hammer and spiritual energy that just like just messes up people and then nails herself to wrecked. To wreck people is like kind of disqualifying from her to be best girl. Now if there's like a best woman or badass category, I think she qualifies, but for best girl she's not best girl for me. But yeah, all right, cool. Okay. So you want to handle best boy then?
Yes. For best boy, we have Senku Ishikami from Dr. Stone Season 2. We have Izumi Miyamura from Horimiya. We have Orokawa from Odd Taxi. Boji from Ranking of Kings. And we have 2 from Tokyo Revengers. We have Ken Draken Ryoguji and Manjiro Mikey Sano. Now, Jay, for me, in regards to best boy, I would say I'm leaning a little bit more towards what you talk about, like for best girl, because I would say for me, Boji from Ranking of Kings should get best boy, mainly because of after seeing some clips from Ranking of Kings, mainly like some of the fights, I've begun to watch it, and with the character that they've done with Boji, just how endearing he is and how people like flock to him because like even though he can't communicate, his heart is very easily discerned. So I would say that he should be best boy. But I feel as though that Crunchyroll is going to pick Izumi Miyamura from Horimiya.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So I agree with you, Sam, that Crunchyroll is going to pick Boji. I've actually started watching Ranking of Kings as well, which oddly enough on Crunchyroll doesn't actually have the Japanese anymore. It only has the English dub. So it's actually under their catalog called Ranking of Kings. It's not Osama Rankings or Ranking, Osama Ranking. So I do think Boji is going to win it. That's like an obvious pick. And I actually want to do something different for this category. Okay. I want to say that I want to do a write-in vote because who should win? Like, who was best boy this season but Noe from Case Study of Vanitas? And I've said this like watching the show, and it actually
I'm surprised he's not even nominated. I thought that like he would have been in there, but then they stuck the guy from Odd Taxi on there,
right, yeah,
and
and
from
it's
Doctor Stone. That's so weird.
exactly because right now the nomination goes. There are 16 nominations for Jujutsu Kaisen, which is
Mhm.
absurd since it came out last year and had already won Anime of the Year and already had 10 nominations in similar categories. 11 nominations for Attack on Titan and Odd Taxi, 6 nominations for Ranking of Kings and Tokyo Revengers, and 5 nominations for 86 and Skate Infinite. So the case study of Vanitas barely squeaked in 2 nominations. So it felt like it was overlooked this year, but I would
Yeah,
say like best boy quality Noe. I think his last name is Archivist,
yeah,
but Noe
Archivist. Yeah.
is like top tier best boy quality for me. But in the end, Boji from Ranking of Kings is going to win.
Oh, really? I was saying like I think that Boji should win, but I was saying that I believe that the guy from
Oh,
Horimiya is
Izumi,
going to
right.
win.
Oh, that's what I
Yeah.
meant to say. Oh, yeah, I meant to bring up that point. But yeah, I don't think they're going to pick that because I think that's a shoe in for best couple. And usually, best
Oh,
boy
okay.
and best girl usually has a corresponding pairing. So, like from last year, Kaguya Sama, who won for best girl, had
Hmm.
Shinigami in best boy category. And since the respective pairs aren't in their separate categories, I don't think Izumi's going to win. That's what I wanted to say earlier.
Oh, okay, okay. Now I got you. Now I got you. Now I understand. I'm picking up what you're putting down. Now on to the best animation. Now, Jay, what were your thoughts on the nominees for this category?
All right, so I'll run us through the nominees for this category. So for Best Animation, basically the second biggest award for the Crunchyroll's awards. So the first nomination goes to Demon Slayer, Mugen Train Arc. Then follows up with Jujutsu Kaisen. Then Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid S, which is the second season. Next is Moshoku Tensei, Jobless Reincarnation, followed by Vivi, Fluoride, I Song, and lastly goes to Wonder Egg Priority. So I'm again split here between what should win and what
Hmm.
will win. I think what will win, again, what will Crunchyroll pick is the Moshoku Tensei, being that is the first publication or production done by Studio Bind. They were literally created for this. And I've said this a couple times when mentioning the show, but they
Hmm.
rival sound design of David Productions, like who's responsible for all the JoJo, as well as their I forgot what engine they're using, but how they animate water for this is like some of the cleanest I've seen since like Land of the Illustrious and some other high budget animation studios. That's what will win. What I really want, what I want to win, is
Hmm.
Vivi, because boy howdy was Vivi like just a spectacle for the eyes. And even though I didn't think it deserved to win like best fight scene, it does have the best animation consistently on a consistent basis throughout its whole run. And this is done by Studio Wit, and they kind of
Hmm.
gave up Attack on Titan to do Vivi, as well as we did talk about in the last news story about the concept novel for Vivi because they were writing it in tandem as the animation was going on. So like for those additional reasons, like to have really nothing to go off of, like just a concept novel and to build storyboards and then animatics and then into animation, it was just a whole process that deserves to be highlighted.
Oh, no, no, no. I definitely agree with you there. Like I think that Vivi is not giving as much credit as it is during these awards because, as we both said earlier, like it's done very, very well in terms of music, the story. Like even though it's an anime original, the story is very, very strong, and it's very, very consistent in terms of animation. Just like you said, I would say like the only other animations that were as consistent in terms of high quality is Mashoku Tensei. And with me, I was split on Mashoku Tensei and Vivi as well. Wonder Egg Priority was done fairly good, but it didn't have it. It wasn't as consistent as Mashoku and Vivi. I would say. Like my pick was Mushoku at first. Um, but as I was going through the awards, because as I was looking through everything, like as you go through the awards before the 25th, where they're supposed to give you like the official rankings, you can cast in a vote. And for me, I put my vote in for Vivi because I feel like not enough people like know about it, and it definitely does, need to have its due credit. But Mashoku Tensei is no slouch, and so if Mashoku Tensei were to win, I wouldn't be surprised. Oh, I wouldn't be that mad because of how high quality it is. But I feel as though that Crunchy is going to pick Demon Slayer, the Mugen Train arc, just because of the recency bias in regards to Demon Slayer. And with the current season that's out, the animation is almost as clean as the movie quality of Mugen Train was. And I would say that the animated arc for the Mugen Train arc is comparable to the movie to a degree. So again, like I said, I think Crunchy is going to go with Demon Slayer just because of recency bias, but the award should go to Mushoku Tensei or Vivi.
All right, yeah. Yeah, for sure, because it seems to be like a clear winner that the Demon Slayer movie is going to win Best Movie
Mm-hmm.
of the Year award. So I wouldn't be surprised if they connected to translate that back into Best Animation award. But I guess we'll see about that because that is an interesting case to make because it is holding again a limited 7 episodes versus the whole run of a complete series. So like how do
Mm-hmm.
you really judge those properly? Like a part of a season versus a whole season by itself. But yeah, Sam, now we're to the final best award that we all want to talk about. So you want to run through the nominations?
Yes, I will run through nominations for the anime of the year. So, what they have for us are 86, Attack on Titan, Final Season Part 1, Jujutsu Kaisen, Core 2, Odd Taxi, Ranking of Kings, and Sunny Boy. Now, going through, I going through the shows that they have there, and from what you said earlier about, excuse me, Jujutsu Kaisen, essentially, basically getting, I guess, like at this point, it's getting a little bit overhyped because it was nominated last year and it's nominated again this year, and even though it has been very, very good, and I'm not trying to take any credit from the amount of quality that they given, and because I mean I'm an avid fan and I'm going to keep watching it, but I feel as though with the award that they gotten last year and the accolades they gotten last year and the amount of hype they've gotten this year, it's basically being overhyped and it's going to be overshadowing all the other animes that definitely needs its due credit. So, like for instance, Ranking of Kings. From what little I've seen, I think that Ranking of Kings should be given Anime of the Year just because of how they're telling the story, the character design. It's very unique, similar to Miyazaki, yet distinct, and the fluidity of the animation is very, very as well as how they tell the story and the different themes that they go for and what makes a king and how to gain the people's approval, things of that nature. However, I feel as though Crunchyroll is going to end up picking Jujutsu Kaisen again, mainly because this time the story is all fleshed out, the animation still as bombastic and as spectacular as before. But I would, if they hadn't won last year, I would feel as though that Jujutsu Kaisen would have earned the award for this year. But that's sort of my take on it. What about you, Jay? What are your thoughts on the nominees?
Yeah, there is something to Ranking of Kings, I think, that's being overlooked because it is in an art style that I guess isn't really familiar. or common with the modern uh, anime watching community, because it does have this Anne of Green Gables or Pippi Longstocking, kind of paying homage to a lot of the design elements from the
Mm-hmm.
80s, like when anime was like transitioning into its, like, I guess, golden age period, and taking a lot of inspiration from Scandinavian storytellings, like we talked about in a previous episode. Oh wow, maybe 2 years ago, Arietti, part of the Borrowers series. Same thing
Yes.
with Miyazaki, who loves like a lot of English folklores with Howl's Moving Castle. I think for all those reasons, it's like one of those high-minded kind of series that you can't really appreciate it on its face value, because you can just sweep it aside as like, oh, this is just Studio Ghibli light, essentially.
Yeah.
So I would say like that's what's keeping me from nominating it in both of my categories. But what I think should
Mm-hmm.
win is Jujutsu Kaisen, because again, this is following its 24 episodes, and how Mappa doesn't really revisit properties. We're probably not going to get another Jujutsu Kaisen season for probably another 2 to 3 years, which feels like a standard amount of time, but it also might not be with Studio Mappa, since they're doing Chainsaw Man this year, as well
Yes.
as
Yes.
following properties after that. So there's no news about their second season, because how they finish off their episode 24 is they're walking into the sunset, essentially, and that's not really ever a good sign. So I think it deserves to win this year, where it
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't have won last year. But I think what will win this year, because of the rule that they just created for this purpose, is going to be Attack on Titan season, or final season part
Final
one.
season part one.
Yeah, because again, that was 16 episodes. Again, that's something that goes overlooked, because whatever Studio Wit is doing with the seasons, it's not broken off at 12. They did 16 episodes, and now they're doing another 10 or 12. I forget the breakdown. But they went really
Mm-hmm.
heavy within that first part to say, like, we're switching the story. And something else we forgot to mention, or at least I forgot to mention, what really not necessarily is pissing me off about this Crunchyroll Awards, is that Aaron Yeager is nominated for both Best Protagonist and Best Antagonist.
It's like, what are you doing? Like talking about spoilers, or not even spoilers. Like you're confusing people.
Confusing people, because that's not how literature works. you can't you can't be a antagonist and a protagonist. Like, there are some cases where, like, just because it's in my mind, like Eddie Brock and Venom, like, just because you have a symbiote, or Naruto and Kurama
Yeah.
and Yuji and Sukuna, like, just because you have a evil creature inside of you doesn't make you an antagonist, or sorry, it doesn't make you the other side of the coin. Same thing as with characters changing motivations or methodologies to their actions. Like, it doesn't change your role in the story. It changes what you do in the story, but it doesn't change how you are the main character in the story. But anyways,
I would say like the biggest comparison to like what's going on with Aaron and the protagonist and antagonist. I would say, because you had mentioned this to me in some of our talks before, in Avengers Endgame, right? Whereas the hero's story is basically Thanos, right? Like Thanos is experiencing his hero's story. He's setting out to do his deed, and he goes through a loss, and he's overcoming these insurmountable obstacles, and he ends up doing the thing, right? But like in Endgame, so like if you think about it like from that perspective, like Endgame, Thanos would be the protagonist and the antagonist would be the Avengers, right? So it would be like sort of like that sort of thing. I would say that's probably like the best comparison that I can think of to why they would, do that like for Aaron, because he's doing his own thing, but because of how Attack on Titan views, or it is at least showing it at that time, it's flipping your perspective on its head. And it does it a disservice because, like you said, in literature, it does like you can only be one or the other. You can't really be both at the same time.
right, because technically, like, it can. I'm thinking about, oh, there is a graphic novel that does do this, but it basically sets up. I think we've actually talked about this, but like it's a story of them becoming a villain, and then a secondary story switches protagonists, and the protagonist of the first series becomes the antagonist of the second series because they are a villain now. They were a hero, they were a fallen hero in the second series, and then they're the antagonist. But again, it's it's the same story. No one. It's Aaron is still the main character and protagonist. No one has shifted into the protagonist's role, and even if he is the antagonist, who's the protagonist now in
Yeah.
the final season? Is it the Eldians? Sorry, not Eldians, Marlians, which would kind of do a disservice to the whole series as a whole. But anyways, that's finite that we can talk about later when the whole season has concluded, and we're probably talking about this again, how it wraps up. But yeah, for who should win, I think Jujutsu Kaisen. Who will win? Attack on Titan final season part 1. But that's our talks about the Crunchyroll Awards. Any final thoughts before we move on to our review, Sam?
Today we are going to be talking about the daily life of high school boys, the property that I had looked online showing that Yuki Kaiji had appeared as an extra in this show, and to my surprise, he didn't appear in the first 3 episodes. So that was kind of my bad, but technically we're still reviewing an anime that he was in, so it works. But before I go on to any more, Jay, have you been exposed to this anime once before? Is this your first time watching it?
Yeah, so we talked about this a little bit last episode that I have not seen any episodes of High School Boys. And this is just a series that, again, has kind of gone not under the radar, but has been like cemented in its place because it's like considered an all-time great. Even again, put this on the list because Forbes magazine called this one of the best of the decade, and I believe this is my pick because of that reason. But did you have an opening for this as well, Sam?
Well, not necessarily. I was just going to say the reason why I was exposed to this was during our time at university together. In our mutual group, they had played a little bit of this, and what I saw, I enjoyed. And looking back on it now, I saw that this production was done by Sunrise and Square Enix, and as we've talked about before, Sunrise is known for the Gundam franchise. And so I was really hyped to see whether or not nostalgia won, or if the jokes were actually well done in this series.
Like you kind of nailed it on the head about what really surprised me about this because like you talk about High School Boys, it's kind of spoken in the same breath as Nichijou, which is also in the title of this because Nichijou just mean daily life or ordinary life. So Daily High School Boys, this is from 2012. You know, we're covering its 10-year anniversary. It's a slice of life comedy done by Studio Sunrise, like Sam said. Studio Sunrise basically is known for their sci-fi mecha properties. You know, they're known for the Gundam franchise mainly, but they're also responsible for properties that we'll talk about later this year, like Excel World and Good Luck Girl. But they've also done recently, this past year, Scarlet Nexus. And to my surprise, they've actually done over 180 animes, which is kind of a lot. It's kind of a lot, but they've been around
Just
for
a little lot, just a
just a
little
little
lot.
bit. Yeah, yeah. I mean, considering they've been around for 40 years, you know, whatever. But yeah, but they're a very high profile company, and I wasn't really expecting a slice of life to come out of them. But it's based off of a manga from 2009. It has 7 volumes, so it's appropriately paced out for 12 episodes of an anime. Same thing with the 6 specials that's available as well. And they're available on Crunchyroll, Funimation, and Tubi. And what I did, Sam, because it's a comedy, I actually watched the English dub. Did you watch the?
No way. I've been watching enough of Crunchyroll, and they only have the Japanese dub there. I haven't had the chance to watch the English dub. How was that? Did you get a chance to compare the two, or you only watched it in English?
Yeah, I wanted to compare the two, but I only got a chance for the English dub because, again, a part of what appeals or what actually works with comedy and why this series is works for me particularly is the timing of it. Because, like, you can
Hmm.
say horror and comedy is one of those things that you can't really express or give your best opinion about because like you can say, oh, that joke was really funny. Okay, what's so funny about it? Well, I laughed. Okay, well, your sense of humor might not be my sense of humor. And I guess that's what I really like about the series is that it feels
Mhm.
so normal, I guess. In its comedy, it feels very sitcomish, like the Modern Family kind of
Yeah.
Blackish. I'm thinking of like kind of modern TV shows. Not so much of the Big Bang Theory because that feels very scripted, but with Modern Family and like Blackish, it's this, and I think Fresh Off the Boat is the other one about the Asian family as well. It
Hmm.
just feels very situated in everyday life. It doesn't feel scripted. It just feels like comedy that ravels out from you and your family and your friends just talking about your lives as they go on. So the strongest point for this comedy for me was that it's improvisation feeling to it, but I'm getting into what I like about it. But the setup to the story for right now is that it centers on three high school boys that are attending an all boys high school. And it is basically their daily interactions with their students or their fellow classmates in like bizarre situations. Well, not even bizarre, just everyday situations as well as like just coming to age endeavors. And it does stand apart from Nichijou because Nichijou is this hyper absurdist comedy, but this is just everyday comedy of boys hanging out and trying to
Hmm.
entertain each other and just being friends. It feels very wholesome in that way. Like even like the first episode is really perfect. So we're talking about all three of the first three episodes because that's non spoilers in our testing to see if the series is worth pursuing. But even in the first series or in the first episode, it's broken up into basically five vignettes. And like one of the vignettes is the boys just talking about shaving their body hair and accidentally cutting off a nipple. and
Yes.
it's like one of those moments like you want to laugh when you're talking about it because of what it comes down to comedic timing and how that works in a show. And it can't be something you can really just say, oh, this is why it's funny, but it's funny because it's just everyday life. It's everything mundane about, oh, I'm asking my best friends about how do I get a girlfriend, and now they want to role play helping me get a
Yes.
girl. Like being a wingman is like something they talk about, or like the moral nature of spying on girls and looking up their skirts and like being a horny boy. And it feels like very boy humor. It's not even that. It just feels like so earnest to what it feels like to be an adolescent boy. Like you see a friend walking with a girl and then you start freaking out because they didn't tell you, and then you get
Yes.
all the other boys about it and like they bully up or they like gang up on him, and it's like again like you just want to tell what's happening, but that's not really selling you on the funny. But Sam, I've been talking long enough. What do you think about it? How do you?
I just want to say I would say like I really appreciate how meta the show was in the first minute and a half and its subsequent episode because it started out like any other sunrise anime show where it's like the main character he's late for school and then there's like a giant robot coming in and then, like it turns out like it's just the boys just trying to think of an anime or something like that, right? But because it is done by Sunrise and by Square Enix, they would play around with the different tropes. Like they'll have a Zaku in Gundam colors so that that it's Sunrise, but they're making fun of themselves. And then you also have basically the boys like they pick up a stick and like they start role playing like the stick is like a sword, like he's going on a quest and he's swinging the stick around and one of the friends is like -5 -5 and he's like, why are my hit points decreasing? He's like, you're holding the sword upside down, just like something stupid that like your friends would normally do. And I would say it's I would say it's funny too because even like one thing that one of the things that they do is like they don't necessarily draw these characters to like they're not, I would say like they're plain enough to where you can tell that they're kids, and like they're distinct enough to where you can tell them apart. Whereas like a Nichijou, like everything's like really cutesy and stuff like that, which I guess is the point of the show. But you know, it's not like they had like over sexualized or like they had really dumb it down. Like they found a good middle ground to depict these characters, and as well as with some of the stories, right? So like it's funny like how the main trio gets in trouble with the main character's sister because for some reason they're always like stealing her clothes, whether or not it's, you know, just to try it on or whatever. And it like saying it out loud, like it sounds weird, but like they make it work. And they also juxtapose it with another group of friends, which I think it's just like the group of funky girls. Um, it's supposed to be like a spoof vignette of the show, and basically like the very first thing with three girls was basically how they were saying that they feel sad for boys because nobody would ever make a show about the daily life of high school boys because nobody cares about boys, nothing that they do is interesting, whereas a high school girl, everything is just automatically interesting for some reason, and they go off and they do the same thing that the boys did earlier, whereas they go and they try on one of their friends' brothers' high school uniform and things of that nature. And like you would have the sibling come into the room at the same time, and like it's funny, but it's funny for a different reason. And it's just kind of interesting how they sort of like poke fun at themselves in that regard.
Right, because it feels very not fourth wall breaking, but it feels very conscious of like all the tropes that people or how writers write slice of life. And Sam, like I know you're not a big fan of slice of life, and I feel like this is very
Hmm.
antithetical to the most slice of life models because it doesn't delve into romance too heavily. It
Yeah.
doesn't distract with fan service or etche. Like it doesn't do anything that supplants the comedy. It doesn't say like, oh, the comedy is the weakest part. Essentially, that's what most slice of life do. It's like we're not a slice of life because slice of life isn't interesting. Like you have to make
Hmm.
everything dramatic. But what Daily Life of High School Boys do is saying that's not true at all. People have, if it's written well, if there's like fun conversations, if people are just entertaining by virtue of just being in the world, then they are fun to watch. And I think we see that with like in other mediums, like with autobiographies or documentaries, even like those prank kind of shows, or when something's getting turned on its head, like American Vandal.
Or like Impractical Jokers, or more recently like Jackass. They're coming out with like their final movie, like Jackass Forever. Oh my goodness.
Right, yeah, because you can play to
Yes.
just the comedy of everyday situations pretty well.
Mhm.
Like Jackass does it with the extreme of things that are going wacky because they're orchestrated, but also wacky
Mhm.
stuff just happens in life. Like Nichijou has a student president council, student president who's like riding a goat in town. It's like you're not going to see that in Nichijou, or you're not going to see that in daily lives. But
Mhm.
Sam, like for a slice of life series, does this get you on board with slice of life, or is this like one of those? This is like the exception.
Oh no, no, no. I'm not on board with slice of life. I would say just like Nichijou and Daily Lives are the exception for me, mainly because like you said, like the comedy is written very well. And I would say the only thing about it for me rewatching this was a lot of it was stuff that I had seen before. So like it didn't really have my interest, but like it was still funny and I had an appreciation for the timing. So like for instance, the skit with the girl that was on the slopes that wanted to live out her novel, right? The novel that she was writing. I didn't really get that the first time that I watched it, but like watching it this time, like I now understood like what was going on in the situation, and now I appreciate it that much more. And so every time they were coming back to that girl on the slopes, it was like, tacking on that initial joke, sort of trying to make like that running gag sort of thing. So now I appreciate that more, and I appreciate the comedy where I can't remember his name, but it was the one student that looked like a ruffian, even though he wasn't a ruffian.
A delinquent character with the lines on his face for like a beard.
Bearded delinquent, that's what we're calling him. Whereas, like, they basically compared him to our main trio. Like, right after the main trio left the stick, him and his friends, they were about to do the same thing. And yet, right before they went on their journey, there was a couple of girls that walked by, and like they all stood frozen. And then embarrassed, they just dropped the stick and left it away. Just again, like just opposing. Where it's like, they wanted to go on adventures and be boys too, but because they also want to get girls, they have to, sort of like throw childish things aside, so to speak, even though girls are just as childish as they are, as we see in the trio of girls. I think it's like the girls just want to be funky, fresh, fun trio.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the only other series I can really say that operates in the same vein as comedy as that this does is Grand Blue. Did you get to see Grand Blue from like I guess 5 years ago now, 2017?
The only Grand Blue that I know is like Grand Blue Fantasy. That's supposed to be based off of a video game. Am I talking about the same one, or are
No,
you talking about a different
Grand Blue is
one?
this very oddly placed situational or sketch comedy about a diving club in high school.
Oh,
And
okay, okay. Yeah, no, I haven't seen it then.
yeah, it follows a bunch of frat bros, basically. So the frats, the fraternity of that school is basically the diving club, and it's so
That's
much.
interesting.
Yeah, it's so much. It shares so much similarities between um, Grand Blue and this series because they do a lot of the same gags of. I would call them like the Titan faces. Essentially, it's the absurdist face they make when they're shocked. It becomes
Yes.
stretched out proportions for some reasons. But you don't really see a lot of comedies that operate in this space for some reason. Well, for a particular reason, because it's really hard to sell the idea that everyday life is interesting to watch without some kind of dramatic element. Same thing with seinen series. Seinen series, again for older audiences,
Hmm.
is basically trenched in tragedy or some kind of disheartening or even lighthearted kind of aspect of life that's very hyper realistic to how life is actually. But the thing that I would say that makes Daily Live High School Boys worth resurrecting is because one, it's unique. There's only one other comedy that can really compare it to, and that it makes comedy writing very accessible, I think, to the average viewer. Again, like talking about why is something funny, is that why this is funny is because it's making fun of itself, it's making fun of other properties in the genre, is being a little bit fourth wall breaky in some kind of instances. And it's also
Hmm.
really educational. And it's like it does lean into the mentality of what boys are thinking at the age and how they process information or how they just hang out with their friends in very wholesome and intimate ways. So for all those reasons, I'm going to give it a resurrect. But how about you, Sam?
Damn, Jay, like you really did sell this. You really did sell this series good, because at first I was going to rebury it, mainly because, as I said, like a lot of the stuff that I saw were gags that I've seen before, and it seemed like it was a little bit slower too. And I guess like my preference is just Nichijou, whereas like it's sort of like over the top type stuff, and the vignettes seemed to have that sort of continual feel to it. But then, talking about how like the sketch comedy, it's, just like taking everyday situations, right? Sort of reminds me of like, so like for instance, the time that I'm at the gym, They have George Lopez playing on the screens, and so like I'm on the treadmill, like seeing George Lopez play out, and like you said, it's sort of a little bit like that, where it's just taking like actual everyday situations, and just like some of the people just having like a regular normal conversation. So, for instance, like the times when the main characters are telling each other scary stories, and then his sister is on the outside listening, thinking, believing every word that they say, things like that. Just very, very well written, and there is a need for that in the comedy sphere, where it doesn't necessarily have to be over the top. It just has to be very well written and very well presented, as well as being smart, like you said, having that nuance where you can poke fun at yourself and show like the same scene with similar characters but make it funny for a different reason. So I would say that this does deserve a resurrect
All right, sweet.
as
Yeah.
well.
Nice. I'm glad I was able to get you on my side of the fence, Sam. But I actually forget what we're covering up next week, but that was our
Yeah.
end of our 10-year discussion on
Hmm.
daily life of high school boys. I don't even want to think about the Japanese title, but I know it has Nichijou in it. I think it's like
Oh,
Dansha.
I got it.
Okay.
I got it. Because from the Japanese, right? It's danshikoukouseinonichijou no Nichijou.
Oh, right. Yeah. So I would like to probably revisit this. We'll probably talk about it again because, again, our whole profile of talking about voice actors was supposed to be to focus on a specific voice
Yes, it
actor.
was
But
Yuki Kaji, but like hit the actor that, oh sorry, not the actor, but his character that he was supposed to portray is Megane,
mhm.
and he was a supporting male character, but in the 3 episodes that we saw, Megane did not show up. So I'm not sure. I'll probably have to go back through and see like which episode that he did show up in. But just to transition a little bit to like what we're reviewing next week, and it's not going to be the same as it's not going to continue with the highlights for Yuki Kaji that we have. The next episode that we're going to be doing is going to be reviewing the 2012 series Brave 10. But if the audience wants to continue with our voice actor highlight, they'll have to be on the lookout for the next anime that we have in his lineup, which is Excel World, because he is a voice actor in that series as well. But next week we have Brave 10. If you want to continue following the voice actor highlight, just look out for the episode where we're reviewing Excel World.
Yeah, it's just really interesting because, like, the reason why we thought Yuji was going to be a star profile voice actor in this is because of all the other profile voice actors in
Oh
this
yeah.
series, is because it's the voice actors from Code Geass, Mob Psycho 100, just like heavy hitters of like voice acting. So when Yuji came up, it was like, oh, of course he's going to be one of the main three boys, or be highly profiled in this. But nope, he's just a weird side character in episode 7 or something. So really interesting. But yeah, that does bring a close to our 10-year discussion on daily life of high school boys. Like you said, Sam, we have Brave 10 next, which I believe is a production IG property, which we're doing somewhat of a collaboration between like looking at the voice
Hmm.
actors of this year as well as like studios that kind of had like kind of not genre breaking, but they kind of broke away from what they're most known for. Same thing as like with Daily High School Boys was done by Studio Sunrise for the same reasons. Like, oh yeah, you don't really expect Sunrise to turn in like one of the best slice of life comedies of all time. And to go back to what Forbes magazine said is that I do believe this is looking to be one of the best of the decade for that reason. But yeah, Sam, is that all we got for today?
Yep, that's all we have for today. And Jay, the question I have for you is, what do you have to say?
I would say something along the lines of bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when we come from you?